Good evening, everyone. Simon Jacobson here. I welcome you all. Newcomers and, I don't want to say old comers, but everybody is new in my eyes at least. There's an expression in the book of Ecclesiastes, Kehelet, that says, a generation comes and a generation goes, and there's nothing new under the sun. As the spirit of the entire book of Ecclesiastes, which is very, you can say almost very depressing, until you come to the last line, it's all about how life is meaningless and everything is hevel v'havolim, as he puts it, everything is folly, vanity. And this statement just captures the theme that so many people, unfortunately, fall into resignation whether we can achieve anything new in our lives. Because as the statement goes, a generation comes and a generation goes, and there's nothing new under the sun. Or as some put it, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, people from beginning of time have been trying to make a mark in this universe, and then at the end of the day, everybody dies. And as he puts it in another verse in that book, Ecclesiastes, King Solomon says, all the rivers flow to the sea and the sea never gets full. Basically, all reflecting on the voice of insignificance, that what we achieve, what we do in this life doesn't really make much difference. And a strong argument could be made for that. You know, we live in a world of 6 billion people, and does anyone really care, besides your immediate circle of friends or family, who you are and what you do? Is there any cosmic significance to our achievements and and the investments and the prices we pay? Or is there really nothing new under the sun? Like the cynics would say that in certain cemeteries there are signs that say, here lay people who thought they were indispensable. You know, are we indispensable, or everybody is replaceable? Which doesn't really give a vote of confidence to all our activities, because if we're really ultimately in the big picture, big scheme of things, not significant, so how important can our choices be? You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really make a difference. So if someone invites you to join a project, and they say to you, you know, we really need you to come, and then when you start fudging and saying, you know, do you really need me? You can do it without me. You say, you know what? We can get it done without you. It's not very motivating when you hear that. Whereas if someone tells you we can't get the job done without you, that's a whole different type of attitude. So how much of our life, our work, is in that category of maybe significant on an arbitrary level, this immediate right here and now, or to on a subjective level to people who care about you, but in the scheme of things, in the big picture, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So in that context, using the verse I cited, it says there's nothing new under the sun, but there's a place called above the sun, which is a place that we also have a capacity to reach, and there are people who have made a difference in the world and in history. For the Jews as a whole, as a people, the Jewish people as an entirety have made major impact. I mean, if you ever read the book, for instance, The Gift of the Jews by Thomas Cahill, it was a best-selling book a few years ago. And he writes it not from a perspective of a Jew, but perspective of a Christian. He shows and demonstrates how certain concepts would simply not exist today in human lexicon, in our language, and in our life, in our civilization without the Jewish people. Words like, just to give you an example, like hope, optimism, providence, faith, stuff like that. So you imagine a world that didn't have hope or confidence or faith or optimism or providence. And there's other words like that that he points out. So it wasn't always common that people felt that history was going somewhere and there's a destination, and that each of us has an indispensable role to play and contribute toward that destination. You know, so in other words, a complete contrary opinion to the one I articulated earlier. So how is it consistent with what King Solomon says, that there's nothing new under the sun? It's under the sun. So we really have two choices. We can choose, as Robert Frost writes in his famous poem, that traveling in the woods, he came and met a fork in the road. So everyone knows the end of the poem, but this is the beginning of it. He met a fork in the road, and he saw two paths before him. two paths for his life, And one he saw was very well tread through and very worn out. And the other path was very few people traveled there. And then he said, and I took the road less traveled. And that has made all the difference. So the real comes down to this question: what road do we take in our lives? Do we take the road less traveled or more traveled? Nobody likes to be called a conformist. And I've tested this with audiences and said, how many people are conformist? Nobody raises their hand, ever. And or once in a while someone does, and then everybody's like shocked. So then the question is, where are all the conformists in the world if nobody raises their hand? The answer is very simple. No conformist likes to be called a conformist. But we would not have a world of idealists and true leaders and pioneers if everybody was a pioneer. So conformity is the natural and easy pull of gravity that all of us gravitate to. We'd like to believe that we've made choices that are unique and different and went against the grain. But the fact is, human nature, as all nature, gravitates toward the convenient and the comfortable and the routine. That's a given. And it takes a serious price to not choose that path. So once in a while, we may choose a different path. We may be forced to choose a different path. But above all, most of us choose the path most traveled on, not the less traveled one. And when you begin to admit that to yourself, then you're ready to maybe choose the other path. Because if you convince yourself that you're a nonconformist when you really are one, obviously there's no salvation, because you're not even aware of your own limitations. You think you're a pioneer. And it's not a surprise why in our generation, for instance, there's so much worship of celebrity worship or sports worship, because we're looking for those individuals that we hook onto, and we think if we're their fan or we're their groupie or we're their follower, it makes us also feel like we're pioneers because we're the follower of a pioneer. But being a pioneer and a follower of a pioneer is not exactly the same thing. So I'm not here to burst anybody's bubble or knock anyone. It's just I'm talking to myself as well as I speak to you. And if we're going to speak honestly, it's important to be able to lay things out on the table here. So with that in context, it comes down to this, that each of us has this choice any given moment of our lives. Even if you have till this moment chosen the path that everybody travels on, that doesn't mean you can't change things this evening and from here on. Unfortunately, as I pointed out earlier, and I just alluded to, but I want to elaborate a bit more, most of us go on the road less traveled when we're forced to, when things don't work. When we tried the conformist path and things fell apart, we were disappointed, or there was pain, or there was loss, and you realize that path doesn't work. So then you are being basically forced and catapulted to a different path, not because you want to go there, but because there's no choice. It's like hitting rock bottom. So you have to go back to a different type of path because the regular one didn't work. In our dysfunctional age, this is very common. In a strange way, growing up in a healthy home and environment generally cultivates one to be more conformist than none. Growing up in an unhealthy environment, a healthy person ultimately is going to, somewhere, as a type of market correction, is going to try to find some type of other option because that life didn't work. So I'm not suggesting dysfunctionality is a blessing, and everyone should have a very harmonious and peaceful life. But the fact is, crisis and challenges are the things that usually force us to be at our best or at our worst. In the words of the Talmud, it says that an olive does not produce oil until you press it, until you crush it. The same is true with our own selves. Our strengths will always emerge when there's pressure. This can be time pressure, peer pressure, whatever the pressure may be. And sometimes that pressure happens to be one that is not comfortable at all, even painful, because it forces you to access deeper resources and reservoirs that you would not access on your own. I remember as a kid, first time I experienced an eclipse. It was a solar eclipse, which is rarer, at least around these parts, than a lunar eclipse. And it's a whole phenomenon, solar eclipse. A full solar eclipse, partial solar eclipse. This happened to be a full one. And it was in the summer, I remember, because we were in a summer camp, and they scared the hell out of us that You can't look at it. It can blind you. The whole shtick, the whole thing. I still haven't gotten down to the bottom of it, whether it's true or not. But basically, this argument goes that when the sun is covered up, there's certain ultraviolet rays and other rays that become much more dominant, and they can burn through your retina. That's the way they say it. I haven't Googled it, so we can check it out. Today we have the Professor Google, Rabbi Google, that can give us all our answers easily and seem scholarly and so on. So, but I remember the phenomenon, and I remember going out when the eclipse happened, and being, I don't know if I would call myself a nonconformist, but I definitely peeked at the sun when it was going into this eclipse. And ever since, my eyesight has been somewhat, I see things differently. I've been seeing a lot of red lately. But it was a fascinating phenomenon. I remember as a kid, you don't really know what is going on. Just it's fascinating simply because it's novel. It doesn't happen every day. And suddenly, middle of the day, everything gets dark for a few minutes, or for the length of time that it takes place. But the thing that struck me, I guess I see it more in retrospect. As a kid, as a child, you remember it a certain way. As an adult, I think back about it. The thing that always really struck me, that captured my imagination, I don't know about any of you, is that in a paradoxical way, as the sun got covered, it revealed more than you see when the sun is uncovered. So this idea that you can, through concealing something, you can reveal more than when it's revealed, was always intriguing to me. And the truth is, in many areas in our life, that's the way it is, which is really counterintuitive. You think if something's revealed, it's revealed. It's concealed, it's concealed. But when you conceal, and through concealing something, hiding something, you can reveal something, is a very interesting concept, especially psychologically. And the truth is that when you deal with people, and I speak from my own experience now, that you learn much more from what people conceal than from what they tell you. What they don't tell you is always more significant than what they do. And I can tell you down pat, without any hesitation, that 99% of people who define a problem in their lives, the way they define the problem is never the way the problem really is. Sometimes it's completely not even the problem, it's just a symptom of the problem. And sometimes it's partially the problem, but not the whole picture. And more fascinating is not because they're trying to conceal it. It's not because they're hiding it, because they themselves don't even know what the problem is. So it's like an intentional, conscious thing that a person's trying to lie or be malicious or something like that. They can't identify themselves. For many reasons. First of all, we have blind spots, we're subjective. And sometimes as I said, we identify symptoms. We don't always identify the root of a problem. On a very basic level, God forbid if your finger starts bleeding, so you can identify the symptom that you're bleeding. You can't always identify the cause, like why. Sometimes you can. You scratch yourself, you got cut or something like that. But sometimes you can't. And that's why you need to go to someone who has a more trained eye, can tell you, this may be some of the causes. And that's on a very empirical, physical level. How much more so when you're dealing with conscious and unconscious and psychological stuff. There, it's not as visible. So reactions we have. Why do some people, for instance, get angry at a certain situation where another person will not get angry in the exact same situation? For example, let's say somebody insults you. Or some other annoying thing happens. We're talking about an objective annoying thing that everyone would agree you were mistreated. I'm not talking about you think you're mistreated and other people would not say you were mistreated. Let's say objectively you were mistreated. Why do some people react in rage and other people take it differently? Some people, it just washes over them. And it's not as simple as just saying, well, some people are smarter and more sensitive, so they are more hurt, and others are just oblivious and more passive, and they don't even know they were insulted. I'm talking about two people who both know what happened. They both know they were mistreated. And yet their reactions are different. They're the same age, so they have the same so-called level of chronological maturity. I emphasize chronological, obviously, meaning they're the same age. They should, and yet their reactions are completely different. Sometimes exact opposite reactions. So clearly, if you ask them this question in any type of scenario, if you ask them right at the time, that probably the person that's angry will get even angrier. So it's not a good time to ask when someone's enraged why they get enraged. Because either they'll say everybody else is at fault, or I'm not really enraged, you're just imagining it, But let's say you can get to a moment of an equilibrium where you can ask this question. Most cases, I don't think both of them probably would not be able to identify why this one reacts this way, why this one reacts that way. I mean, except besides the platitudes like, I just happen to be sensitive, or blah, 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 something like that. The answers lie in the area that is invisible to the naked eye. It's usually connected to, especially if there's a pattern like this. A one-time exception always happens. But if there's a pattern of reactions of this nature, it usually is involved with something that's embedded in that person's psyche from years earlier. It could be growing up in a home, for example, where your father or mother had rage in them, had anger. People like that sometimes growing up, and you see that as a so-called legitimate way of expressing yourself, legitimate quote unquote. You think it's legitimate. So an impressionable child will think this is the way you react. So this is what I just identified as not such a mysterious thing, it's not so invisible, but it's invisible because you don't see it when it's happening. It could be impacting. You could start thinking, I'm 40 years old, I'm 30 years old. How could it be that something that happened when I was 5 years old is still impacting me in my relationships? But it does. I'm using a very simple example. But how many other examples are there that are not so easily identifiable? So the first thing that any time anyone has any issues or problems, the challenge really is, how do you distinguish between the symptoms and the roots? And you're also dealing with an individual who may not be familiar or aware themselves what is the real cause of the problem. You could really say that most of us, maybe the way to really rephrase the question would be, how much, let's use a percentage amount, do you really know of yourself? So I did this unofficial, unscientific survey. I think I shared it here a few times, where a few years ago I decided to ask a group of people. It ended up being like 250 people over a period of time, of all backgrounds, of all genders, of all religions or no religions, and all ages. From age 9 I chose till age 90. And asked them all the same question. The question was this, percentage-wise, from 1 to 100, 100% being total. How much do you know of yourself? How self-aware are you? So 100% would mean you know everything about yourself, and 1% would mean obviously you know very little, or 1 out of 100. And the interesting phenomenon was, no matter who it was, man or woman, Jew or non, religious or not, there was never one exception. It was all connected to the age of the person. Whereas a person, let's say like 14 years old, or the younger the age, the higher the percentage was. The older the age, the lower the percentage was. So just an example, like let's say a 14-year-old, the few that I asked, that age or different similar ages, the answer was usually around 60, 70% I know of myself. And by the time I'm 25, I'll probably know 90% of myself. That's the general attitude when you're that age. And as you get older, the percentages go down. So you ask a 40-year-old would say 30%. And a 90-year-old, and I asked at least 6, 7 people who were 90 years old, all said under 5%. 2 of them said less than 1%. So I said, and when did you come to this discovery? They said, well, not now. The more you grow, the more you mature, the more you see how little you know. And it was amazing to me, because you'd think it would be the other way around. The more a person knows themselves, they lived with themselves 90 years and gone through everything in life, and losses and gains and marriage and the whole everything, you'd think that they're very experienced and they know it all. But it's not surprising, because it's very consistent with, I don't know if this is what they call a myth, one of these urban myths or not, but it's never been resolved. But they say that the patent officer, the U.S. patent officer of the United States in 1898 resigned, and what he said was, he resigned because he doesn't have any function any longer, because everything that could be discovered has been discovered in 1898. So this was in the middle, right in smack in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Yes, there was a steam engine, there was electricity, there was a telephone, a lot of advancements, major ones, revolutionary ones, that changed the world from agricultural society to industrial society in 1898. However, a few little things weren't yet discovered. For instance, there was not the theory of relativity a few years later, Einstein, modern physics, quantum mechanics, let alone forget about the computer, atomic, nuclear, cellular technology, everything we know today. Now in 1998, 100 years later, or today, 2010, There's no human being on this has any intelligence that would make that statement. Now you'd think, well, since then, a little over 100 years, by now, we have discovered everything we could discover. No, but no one is going to say that. Because the more that has been discovered, what has really been revealed in the last 100 years is that the more we discover, the more we realize how much more there is. And it shouldn't surprise us because it's like climbing a mountain. When do you see the broadest horizon? Not when you're on the bottom of the mountain, when you're on top of the mountain. And the higher you climb, the smaller you will become. And this is not dismissing knowledge. On the contrary, this is fundamental to knowledge because it's a very humble recognition of parameters of what we know and what we don't know. And when you acknowledge what you don't know, that too is knowledge and a sign of wisdom. As a matter of fact, a lot of things are discovered through not knowing. So there's a statement that one of the middle-aged thinkers, Jewish thinkers, Yosef Albo wrote a book called the Sefer Ikrim. It's a book on Jewish philosophy. And one of the statements he makes, which is used in other other middle-aged scholars, is Tachlis Hayediyah Shalei Neda, is the expression. The ultimate of knowing is not knowing. And this some people interpret as being, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know, as I've been saying. But the truth is there's a deeper interpretation. That the ultimate of knowledge is knowing the unknowable. Know the unknowable. I don't know how many of you are familiar with quantum mechanics, what we call the microscopic world of physics. But there are principles in that world which define, and we would not have computers today, and we would not have microchips, and we would not have cell phones, and other of these nanotechnology powers without the quantum mechanic rules. Quantum mechanics is completely counter-logical and counterintuitive, to the extent that when it was first being discovered by the physicists in the 20s, like Niels Bohr and Heisenberg and Schrödinger and others of that ilk, it was so rejected that Einstein, till his day of his death, could not accept it. Because one of the principles of quantum mechanics is that there are fundamental elements that are unknowable. And not because we haven't yet found out the information. There was a French thinker in the 19th century, Laplace, who wrote that science is coming to a point that if you give him all the data on any given individual or any given phenomenon in nature, he can tell you everything that it will do till the end of time. So the only thing is lacking knowledge. We don't have enough data. But give him enough data, and the whole genetic makeup of a human being, he can tell you exactly what you'll choose till the end of your time. This was considered to be terrible heresy. The church could not accept such a thing because it basically undermined the whole concept of free will. And his argument was only we just don't have enough data, but give me all the data, I could predict anything. Quantum mechanics overthrew that whole concept, so that's not an issue anymore, because it proved that there's some things that are fundamentally impossible to know. Now, I'm not going to go through all the proofs. As I said, you can read about it. It was counterintuitive. All the scientists themselves could not accept it, but it's become proven in laboratories and replicated again and again and again. There was even a book a few years ago that, I forgot the title, but it was something to the effect that the most reliable machine in this world is built on the rule called uncertainty principle. Now, how can that be? How could the most certain thing be built on uncertainty? The most certain thing was the computer. Computer, the microchip, that is able to contain so much power in such small space, is built on the manipulation of subatomic particles that's only possible based on uncertainty elements on that level of subatomic level. Now, you don't have to accept what I'm saying by faith. This is physics I'm speaking here, not religion. But you can look it up yourselves. The point I'm making here is that the deepest and most fascinating parts of science today are understanding that the more something is concealed, the more it's revealed. And it's essentially exactly counterintuitive to how we would think. Almost like the concept of size. Does size matter or not? And I don't mean it as a joke. Once upon a time, what was the most powerful force 100 years ago, 150 years ago? The greater the army, the more soldiers, the more people, the more firepower, the more powerful you were. Everyone knows today power is not necessarily in numbers. Numbers still have much impact. But today, to create a nuclear explosion, You know what it takes to create a nuclear explosion? Not a lot of firepower. A strand of hair put in certain circumstances of extreme heat or extreme speed and creating nuclear fusion or fission can create more power than all the armies that have ever existed in this universe. What we've discovered is that as opposed to what we thought once something strong is if it's bigger or greater or more physically powerful, more visible to us, we discovered that the more invisible something is, the more potent it is. Now, if you really think about it, it's very logical, actually. Let's just give an example in our own personal lives. If you are asked to speak about yourself, talk about your most intimate self, your feelings in the deepest level, you'll find you'll have very few words to really describe it. And not because you don't trust the people that you're speaking to, because even with someone you trust, you find yourself inadequate expression. When it comes, however, to things that are superficial, like sports or the weather is a good one. I remember riding an elevator a few months ago, and it was very quiet. The elevator was packed, and I said, "So, no one's going to talk about the weather?" The weather is a great way to just kill the time, make believe that we're really communicating. It's very hot, it's very cold, it's raining, it's going to rain, it rained yesterday. It's important issues. So when it talks about the Weather Channel, when the Weather Channel came out, people thought, who's interested in watching weather 24/7? And it became one of the most powerful cable channels. Because for some reason, and you see it every night in nightly news, some reason people feel like if they get the sense of how the clouds are moving, or the pressure systems, you feel like you're in control of the universe or something. I don't know what it is. There's something about it. It's like, like I remember Professor Baranover told me that when he got up and spoke about faith in God, as a scientist, nobody was interested, college students. But he got up and put up all kinds of algebraic equations and showed them x-rays and images and formulas, even though no one knew what he was doing. It sounded very fascinating, because you feel like you're getting a control of the inner workings of existence. But I hope nobody works for the Weather Channel here, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious or anything like that. But the point being is that when it comes to superficial matters, you can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. Just turn on sports radio, and we're not even talking about King James or someone like that, but even things like out of the season, talking about trades or trades of trades or things that are going to come, it becomes a whole obsession. If you ask somebody, is this life and death, or does it really make a difference? I'm not dismissing the people who are fans, but the word fan is short for the word fanatic. That's not my creation. It's short for the word fanatic. But you'll never hear anybody say a religious fan and sports fanatics, right? So when it comes to superficial elements, people can talk and talk and talk. When it comes to talk about yourself, tell me something about yourself, we have very few words. So how do you explain this phenomenon? That the things that are so external and mean nothing, are insignificant, you have an infinite amount of words. And something that is really important to you, you're very difficult to communicate. The answer is, and this is an answer comes from basic Jewish mysticism, that words are containers, and feelings and emotions and expression is energy. Think of it, energy and containers. It's going to be important, those two words. So when you are talking about superficial things, the energy is not that intense. So containers, the words that are containers, you have many, many containers for them. When it comes to an intense, intimate feeling, something that is really part of you, very deep inside of you, it's too intense for a container. So think of a small cup trying to contain a massive amount of energy. It's just not there. That's why words are inadequate. So we created, human beings did, a thing called metaphor, the language of metaphor. Poetry, music, art, some things that are a little more abstract. So little children, you read them poetry, and I remember, as adults, people fake it, I guess, but as children, poetry doesn't make sense. Why doesn't the writer just say what he wants to say? You get older, you officially start appreciating the nuances. That poetry, precisely because it's not being spoken so clearly, the containers are broadened. It's a metaphor. And as a metaphor, it can contain more power. And then there's intensity within a human being, within our inner selves, that even the container of metaphor is not sufficient. So what we do then is sometimes just a cry. When a person bursts out crying, what's crying? So in Kabbalistic and Zohar it says crying is where the energy overwhelms the containers. That's the expression. It's more powerful than the containers, so you have no words, you just burst out. It's just too intense. Or a very profound sigh. A deep oy vey that comes from the inner kishkas, that can capture in one word, 2 words, more than volumes. And then there's such intensity within us that is so powerful that even sound itself can't contain it. Even a sigh, or a laugh, or a cry. The word used in the Zohar for it, the Zohar is the classic work of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, is called Kola de lo yashtama. It's a voice that has no sound. That's the expression used. It discussed context in the context of the sounds of the shofar that we blow Rosh Hashanah. So there are different types of sounds. There's a long blast, there's the different staccato blasts, and there's the short blasts. But then there's a voice that has no voice, a voice that has no sound. And you see, God forbid, in a particularly traumatic situation, and no one should know of this, the shock of an initial trauma is so intense, a person can't cry, they can't even cry out. It's pure shock. It's because it's so intense, nothing can contain it. And at that stage, that is the only power. Silence itself is more deafening than any expression. And then, in a healthy, cathartic, healing situation, at some point, a person should be allowed and be encouraged to cry, to break the silence, because then it begins to help the healing. And then comes a point where you could talk about it, maybe not. You'll see the most intense experiences of pain in the Bible response was always silence. When Aaron lost his 2 children in a tragic way in the temple, and Vayidem Aaron was silent. When God was challenged by Moses and the angels, when the 10 martyrs were being massacred, how could this be? Zu Torah v'zu schara, this is Torah and this is a reward. God said, shteik, be silent, silence. It was not silence out of weakness, a silence of just shut up, or don't challenge me. It was a silence that there's some experiences that simply the intensity of them, there's nothing that can do justice to it except your pure silence. Now I'm using, unfortunately, negative examples because it just captures the idea. But the truth is also in positive examples. Intense joy or love also does not have containers. The containers usually very silent. That's why you'll find people who really love each other, sometimes have a hug or a kiss, they'll close their eyes. It's not even intentional. Because there's something about that so-called invisible reality within us that the containers of this world, including our senses, I was speaking about speech, but it's not just speech. It includes sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. They're all simply really inadequate tools to experience reality on that level. Artists, musicians, writers, ultimately, the greatest compliment you can give them is when you tell them that you've expressed the inexpressible. You've articulated the inarticulate. You've made visible the invisible. Because it's like using words to describe a place that has no words. That's when people have that sensitivity that can go there and can speak to you or communicate. And we say words from the heart enter the heart. Words that come out of your mouth or from your mind, even brilliant words, will go into one ear and out the other. Because there's a language that is beyond language. And that's where real reality plays itself out. The challenge, however, and here's the real problem, is we live in a visible and we live in a very sensory world. We're not just stimulated, we're overstimulated by the tangible. I mean, just think of your senses. How many sights do you see a day? Your eyes see. I mean, getting into the internet and television and all those images being beamed at us. Just please walking down the street. And then there's sounds. And then there's smells. And there's tastes and touch. All the senses are being stimulated and stimulated. And as I said, hyperstimulated because there are people trying to sell us things, trying to manipulate our senses to be attracted to certain items. So you should go ahead and buy them. And it works. That's why the advertising industry is successful. And therefore, if you think of the contrast, that here you have in one world, you're being completely stimulated, you could say almost seduced and consumed by senses and tangible experiences. On the other hand, there's a part of us, and the real part of us, that is completely invisible. That sensory tools simply are inadequate to really experience. But as I said before, that doesn't mean they can't. It just means on their own, they're too small to contain. But if you work at it, you can express the inexpressible, which we'll soon discuss. So in a way, we really have a battle going on, if you want to put it that way. It shouldn't be a surprise that relationships suffer as a direct result. Because when you have a relationship with someone, I'm talking about not a business relationship, I'm talking about a loving relationship. You're working on having a soulmate in your life. That is primarily the domain of the invisible. The thing that makes two people click and the chemistry involved. Yes, it has some physical elements to it. There's physical compatibility, physical attraction, sexual attraction. There's emotional connection. There's intellectual compatibility. But the primary, the primary X factor that ultimately makes two people connect and commit permanently, and not just on a temporary basis, is something that is not on the visible level. It's a connection that's very, very difficult to quantify. So when you think, what is the secret and mystery of why some relationships are enduring and some are not? And I'm not talking about those enduring relationships that are just out of convenience. Like that joke, they're waiting for the children to die or something like that. I don't get it. The joke itself is not such a good taste. So if you got it, you got it. Okay? Or some other marriage of convenience that just, better the known evil is better than the unknown evil. And so I know there are some people, especially if their relationships haven't worked, who say, well, something, there's no such thing as a really excellent relationship that endures. Well, I beg to differ. I've seen it myself, and I am a skeptic too. Is it common? No, it's not common, but it's there. So if you need a guilty conscience, there are real relationships. So you can't just dismiss and say you don't have one because nobody has one. There are people that have. There is a mystery and a secret to it, but it's people who have learned to become comfortable with that invisible element. So what happens really is going on, what we call sometimes the control game. People control. You see, control is on the visible and the conscious level. That's where people need control. People who are comfortable with the invisible and confident, secure with it, don't need control because they know that the ultimate of knowledge is knowing the unknowable, and they embrace it. Those that can embrace that element of vulnerability know the secret of a relationship. They know how to let go. People who hold on to their turf, or they hold on to their so-called, what they consider to be their need for security, it's usually because what they relate to is the tangible, and they do not know how to be comfortable in the invisible. It takes a lot of health to be comfortable with the invisible. So it's not just that there's a battle going on between the sensory stimulation and uncovering invisible forces. There's actually a strong investment, if you're comfortable with your reality, is to stay stuck with it because this is what you feel gives you security. It could be hoarding, it could be material objects, it could be money, it could be anything that you feel is giving you pleasure for the moment. To truly connect to that place that's beyond words and beyond the senses requires either serious discipline or a very deep comfort with yourself, where you realize that you don't have to know everything to be at peace. You don't have to have an answer to everything. And so I go back to what I said earlier about the eclipse. The eclipse of the sun or the eclipse of the moon, the fact that it reveals so much, teaches us a lot about humans and about life. There's the expression, Megala tefach, mechaset fachayim. To reveal 1 inch and conceal 2. It's what a wise person does. You want to learn from wisdom. You learn siyag l'chachma shtika, it says. The strength of the greatest things you learn from wise people is their silence, not what they say, what they don't say. You go to consult with this wise person, so we're usually looking for some great advice. But usually the greatest thing that you can learn from that person is what they didn't tell you, what you have to learn on your own, or what they hinted to that you have to learn. Because it's like between the lines always carries much more power than what's in the lines. It's always the rule when it's coming to true experiences. In false experiences, people who are good salespeople or have the gift of gab, there it's what they say, because they want to catch you with their words. But truth is not necessarily in words, it's between the words, between the lines. Now, I remember an epiphany I had. I was giving this lecture, and it was like considered to be an important lecture with important people there. Every time I think about it, it amuses me again and again. And I was up there, and people were listening. It was interesting scene. A few hundred people in the room. And then suddenly, two children wandered into the lecture hall, inadvertently. I don't think they were even part of any of the guests. I don't know where they came from. And they were completely oblivious to me speaking. Important lecture, and they completely ignored it. They didn't appreciate the depth of the contributions I was making. You'll soon see why I'm saying that. And everybody was like shocked and trying to kick them away. But I remember the vision. They were just sitting there and playing in the corner. And I was thinking to myself, I stopped for a moment. And then I shared with the crowd, I said, something? I just learned something more than everything I've been sharing with you. I learned that this whole thing that we play the game of adults is a bunch of BS. That's what I've learned. Because you see, children respond to truth. And I was thinking, why children, for example, if I would probably go and play with them with little toys, they would sit down and play with me. Maybe they wouldn't. They usually don't play with adults. But they would at least I'd get their attention. But why is it when I'm getting up there and speaking a lecture, or not just me, this means anyone, why do children just simply ignore that? They don't ignore it to say you come over and speak lovingly to them. So I realized why, because a lecture is really an unnatural male creation, not male, I meant to say adult creation, maybe it's male too. It's not natural. Since when do people get up and lecture? Is that a natural thing? Is that what a father and mother should be doing to children when they're trying to give them love and nurturing, to get up and give them a lecture? Lectures are what adults do to entertain each other, to educate each other. Don't get me wrong, I understand the value of it, but I realized that the children just simply don't appreciate it because it's not natural. And if you'd sit down and speak with love and niceness to the child, this was my epiphany. It was a little shocking to some of the professors in the room because they didn't, they thought they were superior cerebrally. But this was what I continued discussing, and I changed my subject, and I said, let's talk a little about reality. And I think the children can teach us more than our brains can. Now, anyway, this was somewhat of a little tangent here. Not completely. The point I'm making here is that we have two realities in our lives going on at the same time. We have this outer reality that we're so consumed with and seduced by. And I include myself. Sometimes you get caught up in things, and they could be very important, but they're not the essence of reality that plays itself out in a place that's beyond the senses. And it takes the eclipse, and it takes sometimes a dark moment to appreciate it. Because as long as you're going through the motions, and everything seems to be working, you can be deceived and thinking, I got it all worked out. And I say it because, in a way, in the Jewish calendar, if you want to put it in a time sense, what the eclipse of the moon, the lunar eclipse or the solar eclipse, is in space, the 3 weeks or the 9 days or Tisha B'Av is in time. It's true it's a sad time, and it's a time where we remember sad things and broken things. But as I discussed last week, and I've discussed many times, in Judaism, there's no such thing as something that's just broken, or just grieving to cry just to cry. Everything is a learning experience. So obviously it's more pleasant to laugh and to dance, but tears and empathy that comes from being sensitive to people who suffer, or people who have suffered in history, reveals another dimension of reality that you don't always see on Purim or Simchas Torah. In other words, when people are dancing and the light is shining, you can't see certain things. An eclipse reveals things that can only be revealed when you conceal the outer reality of things. And that's why I was saying silence can be more powerful than words. There's a question the Zohar asks. There were two types of service in the temple. Are there any Kohanim here in the room, or Levites? Yeah. So we know there are three categories in Jewish people. There's Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. You see, they're called up to the Torah. Kohen is first, the Levi is... Kohen and Levi both originate from the tribe of Levi, who were designated in the Bible to be servants, to serve in the temple. And then there's the Israelites, which is the majority of the Jewish people. But the Kohen, the Levi, Moses, for example, was a Levi. I mean, technically he was sometimes considered a Kohen, but he was more of a Levi. His brother Aaron was like the first high priest, the Kohen. So you have the different children of Levi. The scions became the Levites and the Kohanim. There was a distinction of how they served in the temple. The Levites served through song. They were composers. They composed melodies, and they would sing praise of God. The Kohanim, it says in the words of the Zohar and the Talmud, would serve b'chashoy, in silence. When they served in the temple, they brought offerings, or the ketoret, the incense, or the other activities going on in the temple. It was supposed to be in silence without any sound. So the question is, which is a more powerful service? The service of song or the service of sound? I'm sorry, of silence. You'd think music, song, is more powerful. No? We all know what music and melody does to us. It lifts our spirits. It can transport you to another time and place. And silence, on the other hand, is very, very quiet and non-dramatic. And this is compared actually to two events and episodes in the Bible as well. You have this episode when the Jews received the Torah at Mount Sinai. It was a fireworks show. It was a sound and light show, actually, divine. The first sound and light show. Kelis of Rakim. There was sounds and thunders, and they saw things, and they heard sound. They saw the sounds, an experience of, you may be familiar with the synesthesia. There are people who have synesthesia, which is people who actually see something when they hear a sound, and they hear something when they see a sight. You know, Kandinsky and some other artists in the last generation had this thing called synesthesia. Look it up. Well, at Mount Sinai, all the Jews collectively had a collective synesthesia where their senses were overstimulated. That was one episode. And then, 120 days later, comes another episode, which is called Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, God says, this time, when I give you the two tablets, second tablets, because remember, in between, after Sinai, 40 days later, 39 days later, the Jews had built the golden calf. Moses, in response, broke the tablets, and he went back, and Yom Kippur, he returned with another second set. And this time God said, then I gave it to you with a lot of light and sound. This time it's going to be in silence. So you find these parallel of sound and silence throughout the Torah, many, many episodes. And it's not a coincidence. It's very, very deliberate, because it's addressing what I was discussing earlier, which is more powerful. And the Zohar concludes the service in silence is more powerful than the service in sound. Because as powerful as music may be, and sound may be, and it could definitely stimulate and touch people in the deepest places, but still, as I said earlier, it does not necessarily touch the place of energy that is so intense that even music itself cannot contain it. So there's an expression in the book of Malachim, or where Elijah the prophet is waiting for a divine revelation. And it says that first he heard a loud sound, a thunder. And he thought that God was in the thunder. And then he saw great lightning, and he thought God was in the fire. And then, Koel Rash, what's the third thing? A storm, I think. And he thought God was in there. And then he realized suddenly, after all passed, a silence arose. The words used are Koel Dmamo Dako, a gentle, subtle voice. And that's where he realized where God resides, in simplicity, in the silence. But God surrounds himself with a lot of noise and a lot of racket and whole extravaganza, and people can get distracted by the whole party and forget that the essence is a very simple place. So an interesting way that parallels our own lives We're all sophisticated human beings who developed very complex defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. But at the heart of it all, we are all basically pure, innocent children just looking for some love and peace in this world. I know it doesn't sound so dramatic. So there's a lot of dramatics that we surround ourselves with. Churchill put it this way, I think. He said, in the time of war, the truth is so precious, you have to surround it with an army of lies. So you can say we each surround ourselves with all kinds of armies that deal with all kinds of different challenges and protect us from any predators and those that can hurt us. But at the essence of it, if you really think about it, in a way we're all trying to go back, as they say, back to the paradise, to a Garden of Eden, to a pure place, an innocent place. And that innocence is not so innocent at all. It's at the deepest and most powerful, as I said, power inside of us is very, very silent. However, to get there requires a lot of many, many different roads. So in a way, this period in time, which honors and commemorates destruction, the eclipse, can reveal deeper truths than other times of the year. Because when you have to deal with challenges, it forces you to reveal different resources and access different strengths that you would not access when things are just regular, so to speak. And it's true that ultimately, being comfortable with the invisible and being comfortable with those unconscious forces within us is really ultimately the secret to true happiness. I usually wouldn't say it in such blunt terms because not everybody wants to hear it put that way, quite that way. But I can tell you from my own, as I said before, from my experience, dealing with people, what you really want to help a person discover in any challenge that they may have, and each of us has our own series of challenges, is really getting comfortable with themselves. Most of us are not comfortable with ourselves, either due to the fact that people expect all kinds of stuff from us and we've created all kinds of real expectations and assumptions, so we have to, so to speak, jump through hoops to satisfy other people's expectations. That could be at work, it could be family, it could be parents, it could be growing up in a home that was that way, or maybe just our own fundamental insecurities. We live in a world and we want to fit in. We want to be loved, we want to be accepted, we also want to look unique. So doing all that is a lot of maneuvering requires, and it drains us and our energy. To be able to just be at peace with yourself and not have to perform or have to live up to anything, except just be at peace and live up to your own self and your relationship with God, is a very difficult thing to teach a person. Because if you don't have it within, how do you teach someone to get there? It's like how do you teach somebody to be at peace with themselves when they're not? But it could be done because there is a part of you inside that craves it. It's just that you were forced to wear all kinds of masks and put on all kinds of costumes to satisfy other realities. And this is true no matter who you are and whatever society we're in. As much as we like to feel we're independent individuals, autonomous individuals, and we live in a world, especially in the United States, that guarantees us the Bill of Rights, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, and we have all the freedoms. But remember that one freedom cannot be given to you by any legislation is internal freedom, spiritual freedom. Because you can have all the outer freedoms, nobody imposing upon you what to say or what to do or what to teach or what to learn, which is definitely a great contribution. Remember, in history, it's unprecedented. We only have this country 250 years old, a little more than that. For 300-400 years ago, there was no such guarantee. You couldn't say what you want, think what you want, act what you want. But that should not create the illusion that we're free people. It means there's no one outside imposing themselves upon us in that technical sense. But today there are many more impositions. I would say in many ways we may be more slaves today than they were in the Middle Ages. Because the slavery today doesn't take the shape that you serve somebody or that you are forced to do something. The slavery takes the shape that you are for sale. You have to do something to satisfy a boss, a client, or other people that are making expectations and demands of you in a more psychological way than, so to speak, the government insisting that you say certain things or not send your children to a religious school or something like that. In a strange way, freedom, in a sense material freedom, creates a challenge which is called apathy. internal apathy. And if you ask the question, so what do you really believe in? What are you ready to fight for? What are you ready to die for? Very few people can answer that question really completely today. Because we weren't forced to fight for anything. Young people today do not need to fight for anything. Today's fights are whether I'm going to get this type of iPhone or that type of iPhone. That is a challenge. Or video games. Or other places where we project our battles. But internal wars like that are very difficult to access when you're living in a comfortable environment. So when the Jews honored Tisha B'Av 500 years ago, it didn't take much. It was very simple. They just had to look around. Here was a pogrom. Here was an inquisition. Here was a Holocaust. Here was this one trying to kill them, trying to expel them, trying to overtax them. So Tisha B'Av was a very natural Yom Tov for them. It was honoring or respecting. They realized they were deep in deep gullus, in a deep, dark place, because enemies were lurking all around them. Tisha B'Av today is what? What exactly are we crying for? We dim the lights, it says. We sit on low stools. We're, so to speak, grieving for the destruction of the temple. But, life is pretty cool. Nobody's trying to kill us. Okay, you have here and there challenges, but nothing compared to the past. But today, the challenge is internal, within. Within, really, the battle is over our souls. So Tisha B'Av today is, in a way, a much more profound one, because it has to be, you don't have an enemy outside, it's an enemy within, lurking within. It's really about not being deceived by the illusion of the comfort zone and by the illusion of this whole stimulation on the outer level. And the sad part is this, that usually when we lose something or when something's taken from us is when that part of us gets awoken. When things are working on the outer level, some of us maybe like the intrigue of exploring the world of the invisible and the intrigue to understand what's going on in the unconscious, but it's more like a hobby. We all love the exotic. Over my years of teaching, it doesn't happen anymore because I don't accept it, but the biggest questions you always have is about, when people hear you're going to talk about reincarnation or about the stars, people are fascinated, like what type of body did I occupy in my previous lifetime? And when you say, well, do you have your life together on this earth before you figure out previous lives? So of course the answer will be, if I knew my previous life, maybe it would help me understand my life today. Well, I don't know about that, but dreams, the exotic, we are fascinated by the mysterious and the invisible. But I don't know if it's because of responsible reasons or simply because human beings are voyeuristic and we're curious. We like to know what we don't know. The obvious we're bored with. That's more exciting. But the truth is, as they say about the Kabbalah, those that know don't say, and those that say don't know. I always give this introduction when I give a class on Kabbalah, and I say, so obviously anything I say now is going to disqualify me. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you meet true Kabbalists and true mystics who really see the invisible and really can go behind the curtain, it's not going to be very dramatic, because you see, they have no reason to demonstrate this. They're not looking to show off, because they're really there, you understand, and they're not trying to make money on it. So people who are really there don't have a reason to share it with you unless it's important for you to know it. And the few mystics that I've met in my life, and not many real ones, rarely heard anything from them on that level. When you were ready to hear it and you stopped looking, that's when it was shown to you. Because it's not about you wanting it, it's about it emerging. Because if you want it, then it's on your terms. And if it's on your terms, it's no longer the invisible. It's your visible self wanting to own the invisible. And you cannot own the invisible. It has to own you. There's a fascinating exchange in the Bible. It goes like this. Everyone knows it, but listen to the words. So Moses is up on Mount Sinai. As I said before, he goes back after the breaking of the tablets. And as I said earlier, the eclipse reveals the deepest truths. The deepest truths about God, you know where they're revealed? After the Jews built the golden calf. And after Moses broke the tablets, we find out about the deepest personality of God that we could not know beforehand. Because Moses goes back marching up on the mountain, and says to God, okay, they made a mistake. They betrayed you with an idol, with a false god, after they had heard 39 days earlier, do not create false gods. But I'm here to ask for forgiveness. Now remember, Moses was not down there when it happened, so he was definitely not part of the problem. And God refuses to grant him forgiveness. He says, I don't need to forgive, you were not there. Go build yourself another nation, and we'll be fine. These people betrayed me, there's no way we can reconcile. I'm paraphrasing, but this is basically God's response. And there's a whole chapter in the Torah called Pasha Ketisa, in the book of Shmos, Exodus, that we read. You read the whole exchange. Moses and God, this whole argument that they have. And some of it is very cryptic and can't really be understood without some mystical interpretations. But it's a fascinating exchange. And Moses keeps insisting and insisting. Remember, it's for 80 days he spent on the mountain. 40, 2 sets of 40 days. Until he prevailed, by the way. And that's when Yom Kippur was born. Hope was born. But one of the exchanges goes like this. Moses says to God, show me your face, he says. Hareini na es chveidecha. Show me your glory. Show me your face. And if you read it, it's not just some type of line. It comes after Moses has such an intimate and close connection to God. It's like, you could almost think of it's almost like a lover speaking to a lover. Show me your face. I want to see what you really like. Speaking to God. It's very intimate. And God responds with a famous line that, Lo yireini odom v'chai. No person can see me and live, including you, in other words. Nobody can see me and live. First, let me just read the verses, and then we'll understand them. But Moses does not give up. But then God says, only adds a footnote. It says like this: V're'isa es acherai. You will see my backside. Uponai lo yiro. But my face you will not see. In other words, finally God gives in and says, I'll grant you part of your request. You'll see my back, but you won't see my face. So of course everyone asks the question, what's going on here? Number one, Moses was a wise man, the wisest of all. Did he not know that the person cannot see God and remain alive? You know, God was basically saying, like there's an expression, Ilu yadaitiv heyisav. If you knew me, you would be me. That if you see my face, you no longer will be you, you'll be me. And you cannot maintain your individuality in the flight of the intensity of seeing me face to face. And yet Moses still asked. And then what is God saying afterwards? Okay, I won't show you my face, I'll show you my back. Which of course is metaphorical. But then he has to like rub it in. God says, but my face you will not see. He already told him that you can't see my face and live. Why does God have to repeat it again? He could have said, you can't see my face, but I can show you my back. So here's how the Ponim Yofis, a great commentator, explains it. He says like this, that when you read the second verse, you have to put the comma not after the words, you'll see my back, comma, but my face you will not see. You have to put the comma after the words, but my face. In other words, you'll see my back and my face, but my face you will see by not looking. So it's not that you won't see my face. The only way you could see it is by not looking at it. So you'll see two experiences in your life with me. You can see me directly, only my reflection. But if you want to see my essence, you have to close your eyes. And you have to come on my terms, and not with your eyes. And then you can see me. The depth of that statement is extremely profound. I'll apply it now to human relationships. You know, there's a custom by chuppah, before the ceremony, Jewish ceremony, the custom is that the groom covers the face of the bride. Traditionally, it comes from Rivka covering her face when she met Isaac, future husband. So usually it's interpreted as a sign of modesty, a sign of this, a sign of that. But it's a little more profound than just that. It's really saying that the deepest part of a person can only be seen when it's concealed. If you really want to transcend yourself and see another human being, truly see another person in their deepest way, it cannot be you are there and trying to control it. You have to come to their place and not expect them to come to your place. And if you don't have that humility, and yes, vulnerability, and even a risk to a certain element, you're not worthy of entering that place. And think of it from the other way. Who will you allow into your soul and your heart? Only someone you fundamentally trust, that you know if they come there, they will not steal something from you. They won't abuse it. And you'll never let someone in if you think that otherwise. What does it mean that they won't abuse it? It means that they're not coming in to own you, or to control you, or to just see something because they're curious. They need to know your secret because they truly love you and they're ready to come on your terms. And then you welcome them in. For people to have that type of humility requires a lot of strength, because we are control freaks. That's the bottom line. Some more than others. And not always intentional. It doesn't mean maliciously. It's because we're insecure. When you're an insecure person, you try to control your circumstances. And the reason most of it is because we live in a world where others are trying to control us. So why should we be left vulnerable? So we have to also control. Now that's fine maybe in the business world, in areas where your relationships don't have to have such depth. So there, okay, fine, there's a game being played. Everyone plays the game. There's certain rules. Try to be as ethical as you can. But it's a swimming with sharks. You have to have your the art of negotiation, as they call it. But unfortunately, it spills over into the areas of our lives where those rules shouldn't work and shouldn't be there. It shouldn't spill into the life of our children. It shouldn't spill into the life of truly loving another person. But I can tell you, it's so sad to see sometimes, but how people behave in business and at work is how they behave in their relationships. And again, it's not even malicious. It's just that we've become so accustomed to these tools of how the outer world works that we just don't even think and don't realize that there's another world where it doesn't work that way. Even the great Moses, and there was no one greater than him, had to be reminded of that. So of course Moses knew that you can't see God and live. He understood that. He still wanted to see, and not for selfish reasons or voyeurism, because Moses was a man of God and he wanted to have a very profound, a deepest possible relationship with God. So he wanted to go enter into the deepest place. And God basically said to him, you want to go there? You're going to have to close your eyes. It's not going to be on your terms. And it's interesting because there's another statement which is equally moving, which also is somewhat strange until you appreciate it. A little while earlier, would say several years earlier, the first time Moses meets God, a similar thing happens. So you all know the story of the burning bush. Moses is tending to the sheep, and he sees in the distance a bush burning, which is an odd spectacle in the middle of nowhere. And it's burning, and it's not being consumed. So he realized there's something going on. And he realized that he was having a divine revelation, a presence. And that's the first communication he has with God. And at that time, if you look at the verse in the Shmos, in the beginning of Shmos, it says that God says to Moses, look at me. Because Moses covered his face when he saw the burning, because he was in awe and in humility. He realized it was an experience that he was beyond him, and he covered his face out of respect. So God said to him, look at me, I want you to look at me. And Moses refused. Not for good reasons. He refused because he didn't feel worthy to look at God's face. So it says, interesting medrash that says, a Talmud actually, that says like this. I mean, if you think about it, it's an extremely powerful concept. That when Moses says to God later, show me your face, you know what God says to Moses? When I wanted to show you my face, you didn't want to look. And now you will not see it. That's the Talmud says. So the question is asked, what is this, God getting even? What is this like, I didn't want to, they're playing a game? Sounds a little like a date, when I wanted to show you, didn't want to look. Now you want to see it? No. That type of thing. But the answer is obvious. You want to see my face, it's not going to be on your terms. When I wanted to show it to you, you didn't want to look. You wanted to be humble then. And it was for good reason. But because you didn't want, that's why I want you to see it. Now that you want, no, that doesn't work that way. You want to see it, you're going to have to close your eyes. So there are experiences in life that you can experience when you close your eyes. Why do you think we cover our eyes when we say Shema? It's become mechanical for so many people. You just stick your hands on your eyes. Because you're really saying is that you're shutting down your senses. And truth is you should be closing your ears too and your taste, touch, and smell. But you just have two hands, so I guess you can't do that. So, but it's symbolic of the idea that you're trying to close out the world around you and recognize there's a reality beyond us. So then, of course, the big question that begs is, so why doesn't God reveal himself to us? If God just showed himself once to me in my lifetime and told me what I need to do, all my problems would be solved. And you could say it's a fair question. Once at least. Why does God have to be invisible? Well, the thing is that if God did appear to us in our terms, it would be us, not God. It would be God coming to our terms that we're comfortable with. The real ultimate reason why idolatry is such a sin is because we want to have a God on our terms, something I can see, I can hang on the wall, I can identify with. You want to experience truth on your terms, then it's not truth, it's your truth. The whole point is that you have to realize that it's something beyond you. So it's not God is trying to be difficult. Its reality is not the myopic reality that we experience the here and now. And I always have to share this because I think captures it so vividly. People always ask, where does the soul go to after we die? After 120 years, 180 years, whatever the arichis yamim shanim tevis a person has. Where does the soul go to? I've heard this question so many times. I've asked it myself. I remember the day 5 years ago. It was 5:17 p.m. on a Sunday, and May 20th, May 29th, 20th of year, when my father's soul left his body. And I remember right there and then, a person who I've consoled many people and talk about the soul, and I was wondering right in front of me, where did my father's soul go to? Suddenly I see a body, same body, nothing changed, but it just doesn't have the soul any longer, at least not the visible one that makes us who we are. And obviously when I asked it then, it wasn't a philosophical question, it was an emotional question. But that's the question we all ask. But if you really think about it, it's really a question that comes almost, but not on the same level as Moses, but the similar idea. It's a question that is based on an assumption that you can call arrogant in a certain extent. It's definitely narrow. The assumption is, I am where it's at, so I wonder, where does the soul go to when the person is no longer where I am? But who said you're where it's at? Who determined that? You determined that. So I always have this, I guess it's a somewhat comical dialogue between a refrigerator and electricity. So the refrigerator asks the electricity, where do you go to when they pull the plug? And the electricity says to the refrigerator, what do you mean where I go to? What kind of a chutzpah is that? You're a little box. They just invented you in the last 100, 200 years. A little box. They figured out, human beings that is, how to contain and generate electricity and draw it into, with a cord into this little box. And now you think, since that you're where it's at, and you ask me where I go to. I was here long before you were ever born. I was here long before they invented you. And I'm here far outside you have to think outside of the box, so to speak. Okay? And I just go back to my natural place before they figured out how to hold me hostage for a little while inside of you. And if you think about it, there's no question of course that's the story. So we all have our little box, it's called our body, and we have our sensory tools, the visible reality and empirical reality we experience, and it convinces us, and we convince ourselves that this is it. And this little box wants to figure out, like, where do things go to, and wants to understand those things on our terms. It doesn't work that way. You have to shut your eyes and shut your senses, and then you suddenly realize that even in your little box, you could also realize there's a deeper reality. But you have to get out of that trap. And the only way is to understand that you have to be the one that opens yourself up to that, or else it will not enter into your life. Love, as opposed to every other commodity in this world, is not purchasable. You can't buy it. Not on shelves, not on J-Date, and not in any other place. Love emerges. You can't purchase it. You can't trade it, and you can't acquire it. It emerges. Like all truths, they emerge. It says, Emes me'eretz titzmach. Truth emerges. It's not acquired. Every truth that you will ever hear in your life, no matter how good of a teacher or book or inspiration that brought you that truth, they didn't bring it to you. They helped uncover the layers that did not allow you to see the truth that is inside of you. That is the sign of real truth. It's called resonance. That's what happens when you hear music and it just touches you. That's when you hear a truth that you say, I always knew this, except I didn't put it quite in these words. That's when you feel love. You feel a sense of belonging because it's not something you got, you bought, and you're like now bringing it home. It's something that emerged that was always there with you. You just didn't even know. That's what true resonance is. But the only way to get there is exactly what God says to Moses. By not looking, it'll emerge. That means you have to shut down some of your aggressive tools that you're so accustomed to. You have to shut down even the senses that distract us and keep us busy with an outer reality. And then these deeper realities emerge. The Talmud says that when the Babylonians entered the Holy of Holies on Tisha B'Av, which is next Tuesday, saddest day of the calendar, so they entered the Holy of Holies. And they witnessed, the Talmud says, the Kruvim, the cherubs. On top of the Holy Ark were two golden images. One of image of a boy, one of a girl, male and female. They were carved on top of the cover of the ark. And it says that they saw these two cherubs facing each other. Now the Talmud says the following, that when God was happy with the people, and there was shalom bayis, when there was peace between God and the people, the two cherubs would face each other. When there was anger and divisiveness between them, the two cherubs would face back to back. That's what it says. So the question is asked, of all times, Tisha B'Av, right before this temple was going to go up in flames, the worst possible time of the year, worst possible time in history, and God is allowing the temple to be destroyed, and the cherubs were facing each other? I mean, what does that mean? And the answer given for this is that in the depths of darkness is always born the depths of love. That Mashiach, the Talmud says, is born Tisha B'Av afternoon. At the worst and highest point, when the flames were rising to their highest, redemption was born. That's what it says. Because there's no such thing, as I said earlier, as total destruction. In a strange way, it's like you destroy an old building in order to build a greater building. The Jewish people were not worthy of having a holy temple because they were not at peace with each other. But it did not mean that there was no deep love between God and the people. If there was a problem, he would have destroyed the people. He allowed the temple to be destroyed and not the people. So at that moment was the deepest moment of love, even though it was concealed. In other words, what I said earlier, that sometimes the deepest concealment reveals the greatest strength. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, but you know where Yom Kippur was born? Out of the golden calf. If there was no building of a golden calf, there'd be no Yom Kippur. The Jews built a golden calf. They betrayed God in an overt way. It was what's called b'mezid, intentional sin. It was not a mistake. They didn't it was very, very deliberate. And Moses goes on the mountain praying for them for forgiveness. And God refuses. But then Moses prevails. And the opening night of Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, right after Kol Nidre, we say the statement God said to Moses when Moses prevailed. He says, "Salachti kidvarecha." I have forgiven them as you've requested. So Yom Kippur revealed that there's a deeper love between God and the people than we would never have known had there been no betrayal. Because when do you really see a commitment and connection between two is when it's been challenged. When things are not challenged, you could always say, well, we don't know what it would be like if they were challenged. Even halachically, I mean, even today in secular law, there's a law that says, shtar sheyotzal of irur, two people make an agreement, a contract, and they sign it. And then one person challenges, appeals, and says, no, the contract is not legal, or it's not, it's a wrong contract. And then the appeal is upheld, meaning the contract is affirmed. So it says that then after that, no one can ever appeal this contract again, ever. Because once something is challenged and it overcomes the challenge, it's always stronger than if there was no challenge. Which is similar to our law here, when we have appeal. You finally reach the Supreme Court, let's say after all the appeals. Once it's affirmed there, nobody can ever challenge it again. Because there's a strength that emerges once there was a challenge and it withheld it and it withstood the challenge. Like what they say, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And in that sense, especially psychologically, what happened after 80 days of Moses praying, he was able to reach the face of God by not looking, and as a result was able to elicit what we call the 13 attributes of compassion, of empathy. Well, Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, that we say repeatedly again and again in Yom Kippur, because that was the secret that God revealed to Moses after the sin and after he begged for and appealed for forgiveness. So God said, I will reveal to you the secret of my compassion. And whenever you'll need it, and you're sincere, invoke these names, these 13 attributes, and you'll be able to reach a part of me that you could never have reached had there been no break. So again, the eclipse, the darkness, reveals something greater than Revelation does. They say at the end of, after Tisha B'Av comes the 15th of Av, it's a holiday, and the Mishnah says that there were no holidays among Israel like 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, of all things. And Yom Kippur, as I just explained, we understand why, because it revealed that power of forgiveness. But what's the 15th of Av? As a matter of fact, most people don't even know it's a holiday altogether. Some call it the Jewish Sadie Hawkins Day, because it says in the Mishnah there that the single women looking for shidduchim would go out into the fields, show themselves off, and different matches were made at that time. Maybe a study should be done exactly how that happened. Like an ultimate singles party. So the Talmud later explains all kinds of reasons why it was such a special day. But they're still lacking the ultimate, what's the real power of the day. So the Arizal, Isaac Luria, whose yahrzeit, by the way, is in 2 days, 5th of Av. In this darkness is born this great mystic who was born in Jerusalem, went through Egypt, and final years was in Sfat, maybe the greatest Kabbalist of them all, Isaac Luria. So he says the reason the 15th of Av is the greatest holiday is because it follows Tisha B'Av. And you read the Tzerech Aliyah is the expression. The greater the descent, the greater the ascent that it leads to. So a little, in using mystical language a bit, he says the destruction of Tisha B'Av is the destruction of dignity, of Malchus. The full moon is the rebuilding of dignity of Malchus. The full moon of Passover, for instance, or of Purim, or of Sukkot, remember Sukkot, Pesach, Purim, they're all on the full moon. Purim, Yudalet, Tezvav, but Passover is on the 15th of the month, Sukkot is on the 15th of the month, because the full moon reflects a fullness, a completeness, spiritual completeness. But they don't come after any destruction. The 15th of Av follows the destruction of the moon, spiritually speaking, and therefore, when you rebuild after destruction, it's always greater. Like Yom Kippur is greater than any other holiday because it came after the sin, the tshuva that comes after the sin. So there's a power in, you could say, in loss, or in the eclipse, or in darkness, that reveals a greater light that you cannot see in light. It's an intensity, it's a deeper resources. There are many ways you can explain it. You could say it's like the thirst and the appreciation of water that a thirsty person has as opposed to a person who's sated and not thirsty. Some intensity there that just simply cannot be, does not emerge unless you go through that darkness. So in a way, this period in time, which is this type of darkness, has in it that type of intensity. But it's concealed. But when you close your eyes and you allow yourself to access it, you can reveal something deeper than when your eyes are open. And that, in a way, is one of the messages. On a personal level, it means that it's an opportunity in this period in time to, you could say, do a study in contrast, comparing the outer reality and the inner reality of your life. And it's very easy, as I said, to go right back to that outer reality. It's our routine. I mentioned the road less traveled is the one that most of us do not travel. Once in a while, we may be intrigued by the exotic elements of it. But the fact of the matter is, that's where life plays itself out. And all those people, what we call those people that know the secret of being true, the secret of being real, are people who know how to access that by will, that inner world. And then they know how to bridge it, to bring it to the outer world. Now we all have that capacity, but it takes training, and it takes discipline, and it takes courage. It takes courage to feel comfortable, to enter a world where you're not in control. But in many ways, by being not in control, you're much more in control than the world that you think you're in controlling. I don't know if that came out right, but you get the idea. Another paradox. Fine. No, but I think you understand what I'm saying. That the real areas in life are the areas that are beyond the ones that we really hold on to. And when you're able to allow that to emerge in your life, in a sense, you are the true master. And that is really the secret of love, the secret of God, the secret of all real truths. Ask anyone that is artistic or a writer or anyone that's channeling. They will always tell you that their moment when they're in the zone, it's precisely when they're not in control of it, when they allow something else to flow through them. It's the rule. Everyone who will tell you about the greatest things they've ever accomplished will be where they, at some point, it takes work, because it could take hours, it could take years to get to that point. And when you're there, it just flows through you. And when you're not there, it does not flow through you. You can force it, you can try to force it, but it's on your terms. When that creative energy flows through you, you know it's coming from another place. And in a way, you are really just being, it's a gift. It's a gift that flows through you. It's not something you really can even initiate. There are times you can be desperate for it, but it doesn't happen. It sometimes happens in strange ways. Like the Tzemach Tzedek was once going to synagogue. He was rushing because the minyan was about to begin. There was a poor man outside, and because he had to run into the davening, he ignored him. And he began his prayers. It just wasn't clicking. He wasn't able to connect to what he usually was able to connect with. And he realized that Yov Pruta La'ani V'Hoder Matzli, the Talmud says. Give a penny to a poor person, and then pray. Because prayer became selfish for him. It was he wanted to pray. So he realized you better go outside and find that person and help them. When you go out of yourself, that's when great things come through you. If you are all about you, you'll only get what you can bring to the table. And it's the rule of existence, that when you are dedicated and committed to your own needs, no matter how great you are, you're going to be only as great as your own needs are. So no matter how brilliant you are, that's how great you will be. But when you're committed to a cause that's beyond yourself, then you become an extension of that beyond. And if that's eternal, you're eternal, because you're an extension of it instead of it being an extension of you. What I said here is the secret of all reality of eternity, but the difficulty is to do it, because it's so difficult, because you go back to, gravitate back to your routines and to your natural habits, which is to hold on to the immediate, and it should be an extension of you. As soon as you become an extension of something beyond you, you achieve a reality that you are now a channel of. And that is itself the greatest challenge. So in a way, the 9 days, Tisha B'Av, is an opportunity to go to that place. And if one really takes to heart what the significance of these days is, it's not just about mechanically dimming the lights and not eating and drinking on Tisha B'Av. It's about really going into an internal place that is not driven by food and by your own needs, and allowing another reality to emerge. As I said, redemption is born in the throes of the deepest darkness. So God should bless us all. We shouldn't have to have really deep darkness, and awareness should come to us with lesser wake-up calls, and to use these days to the fullest of what they're really capable of. And may we should be able to meet our souls in that inner reality, in the inner worlds, in the higher secret chambers. You know, the expression in Kabbalah, they talk about the hidden spheres. There's the revealed spheres, there's Esospheres Hagnuzis, it's called. The hidden spheres, the hidden energies. And there are the hidden worlds, Alma Discasia. These are all the forces that exist on the unconscious, waiting to be released, and they're right inside of you, within you. But they can only be released when you free the trap and the outer forces that hold us hostage like tentacles, and then those forces emerge. And this is a period in time where we can access that. So as I said, may God bless everybody And maybe be able to meet on that level, that outer level, that inner level, and bring it to the outer level. And please see myself, Velvel, who's waving from the back there, right? And all of us here at the Meaningful Life Center as maybe bridges between the unconscious and the conscious. How do you like that, Velvet? You want to be a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious? Okay. And we're not talking about skeletons in the closet. We're talking about revealing the deeper, beautiful energies within. Like someone wrote to me an email, says, I'm afraid of entering the unconscious because he doesn't know what's going to lurking there. So I want to say is that, so please see us as a resource, a friend, anything we can do to help or assist. Because of Tisha B'Av, no, we will have. The next week I'm doing class Wednesday night. Tisha B'Av is Tuesday. So we'll continue our journey then, online or on location. I just make a few announcements about some of the programs. I began myself a series that I started last Sunday. We'll continue next, but next Sunday won't be on location. It'll be only online because there's something else happening here. So it's like called this 8 Secrets. It's 8 Secrets of the Baal Shem Tov principles. And next Sunday I'll be doing part 2. It's a 4 Sundays. That's next Sunday at 8 p.m. If you want to register or be more information, just talk to Velvel or Golda Malka. Your cards outside for everybody about this, right? You gave everybody? Okay. Then there is Kabbalah of Cooking. Okay, that's finished already. That series is available online as well. Last night was the second part. Then there's the Who's Who of the Talmudic era with my own son, writer, poet, Mendel Jacobson. Yeah, that's his name. That's 8:30 Thursday. This Thursday will be the third and final part. Again, online as well. And finally, next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, there's a social evening here. We don't call it singles parties, but it's like a social evening with Shimona. And that's at 8 p.m. right here as well. For more information, you can check it out. Now, these I know are announcements on the outer level, but hopefully they will reflect some inner forces as well. And then I want to say the class is dedicated by our good friend Mark Belinsky. See here? In honor of his grandfather, Menachem Mendel ben Meir. Your site is on the 4th of Av, right? And finally, if you haven't left your email address here, please do so we can stay in touch. I send out a weekly email every week, as well as we make announcements about events, things happening. So please feel free to share that with us. And finally, if anybody wants to sponsor a class in honor of a loved one or a yahrzeit or a birthday or anything, it's always a great opportunity. I welcome that as well. And finally, since I see some faces I haven't seen in a while, I want to again thank you for coming. And right, Philip's class continues tomorrow at 7 p.m. Creative Spirituality, right? I forgot to mention that. And I'm sure Philip is watching. And as I said, it's great to see all of you. Those I'm meeting for the first time, please don't leave before you say hello. And those that are here, I see you more often. But as I said at the beginning of the class, above the sun, everything is new. So it's all new faces, and you should only experience renewal every moment and every day. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to speak to you.